I mean, I'm going switching back to English, which will be the language of our presentation. So we are ready to go. Hello, everybody. So I'm Jean-Christophe Le Toquin, the coordinator of Encryption Europe, an alliance of SMEs delivering services in the field of encryption. And the purpose of our alliance is to promote encryption and to explain and to make it simple and accessible to everybody. So thank you for your presence today. So the topic of today is, I mean, combining difficult questions, which is, so Stéphane Glandu, if you don't hear, yes, it's probably on your side. Gregory, I will let you answer people who will participate on the in the chat room. So combining difficult issues of data on the cloud, what should we encrypt, and how this is compatible with GDPR, and how GDPR is a solution or a problem. And for this session today, we have 4 speakers. We have 1 member of Encryption Europe who will open the discussion, with Arnaud Laprévotte, CEO of Lybero, and then we'll have Xavier Lefebvre, who from CEO of FairSmart, who works for with Lybero, and they will explain to you how, in practical terms, they deliver encryption into the service and how this is actually make GDPR user-friendly and practical. So this target group for today, I mean, if you are CISOs and DPOs, then that's really should be this very interesting for you. But we have a broader set of participants today, with, I mean, people in regulation in particular. So, and our 2 participants will be Eric Bedell, which will be a witness. He's the CPO, Chief Privacy Officer of Franklin Templeton. I will do an introduction a bit later. And Christophe Buschmann is commissioner at the CNPD, which is the regulatory privacy regulator of Luxembourg. So again, I will say a few more words just before we give the floor to them, so you can connect the person with the presentation. To begin with, so Arnaud Laprévotte is CEO of Lybero, as I said. He's a serial entrepreneur since 1996. He established the first company really focused on open source as a model, and he developed more companies. And the last one he created is Lybero in the field of encryption. So what we would like to hear from you, Arnaud, is okay. So what do we talk today? I mean, in terms of encryption, how this applies to the cloud, to the web, and first and foremost, how you have been rebuilding your solution on GDPR, so you make regulation really work. So over to you, Arnaud, on this really high-level introduction before we listen to your solution with Xavier.
Thank you, Jean-Christophe. So let's start by 2 things. In fact, encryption is something which is known, used for many years, but there's a change in the landscape. Originally, concerned people knew that it was well to protect data. And in fact, you have very few choices except encryption to do that in a digital environment. And so it was something you had to do. Then it becomes to be integrated in different norms. And now, for some years, it's integrated in the laws. So obviously, RGPD was GDPR was really a key regulation where things were discussed. So if you look directly at the text of the GDPR, in fact, there are 2 main places where where encryption is quoted. The first one is Article 32 on security of processing. So what it says is, well, you have to use appropriate measures to ensure the level of security appropriate to the risk. And encryption is quoted here as a first solution with pseudonymization. It's not the only solution, obviously. And the second place where encryption is quoted in the text is, in fact, in the Article 34, where which concerns the communication of a personal data breach to the data subject. So it says, well, if there was a data breach, but informations, the data that were leaked are encrypted, and there's no way for the attacker to access the data, then you don't need to provide this information. So here also encryption is quoted. And in fact, if you look at the different laws, so there is GDPR, eIDAS, now there's also e-privacy, and NIS. And in fact, there are many laws that are integrating encryption as a requirement in there. And it's something which is clearly increasing more and more. So I'm sure that Xavier is going to explain that from his point of view. So please, so that was GDPR. So Xavier, so FairSmart, just explain us what you are doing.
Good morning, everyone. So FairSmart is a SaaS software provider, and our solutions are designed to take care of all the visible aspects of GDPR compliance for our customers. What do I call visible aspects? It's the aspects of GDPR compliance which imply an interaction with the end user. It's what we call privacy UX. It's mainly three things: consent and preference management, GDPR rights requests management, and personal data transfers or acquisition. So our solutions are labeled Privacy Tech, AFNOR certification, also mentioned in the Gartner's Market Guide. And in Luxembourg and Belgium, they are distributed by LuxTrust, which is our exclusive reseller. Now, next, please, Arnaud, why did we choose encryption and why did we implement encryption into our solutions? First, it's obvious, but consents are personal data. And they must be treated, managed as such. And a consent management platform must handle all use cases. One of the main objectives of implementing a consent management platform is to build a single source of truth, which will enable the data controller to know, am I allowed or not allowed to run such a process on this data for that person, etc. It means that you must be able to handle all use cases, including the one which may imply special categories of personal data, like health data, etc. It means that security measures, appropriate security measures, must be implemented. We were lucky also, since we incorporated FairSmart in 2016, and GDPR was already known, even if it only came into force in 2018, we knew it, and privacy by design was already a set rule. So we tried to take it into account and implement it the best we could. Last but not least, there's a strong market trend towards privacy and encryption, broadly speaking. So at that time, we decided to implement encryption because it makes us different from our competitors, and also we anticipated that the level of security requirements would only rise in the coming years. And what is important in with the encryption, it's that if you want to implement encryption, it's really difficult to implement it afterwards, and end-to-end encryption in particular. So it was really important right at the beginning to have that in mind and to take it into account. We act as data processors for our customers, which are data controllers. And most of them are huge and big companies with CISO, etc., and security policies. So it was also important for us to really take into account these security policies that were already in place. Next, Arnaud, please. So what was our issues and what are the issues regarding consent management, broadly speaking? First of all, we have some functional requirements. It's to secure, of course, consent receipts and isolate the data of one of our customers from, of course, the data of other controller, and have a traceability of access. And end-to-end encryption helps us do that. It also makes it impossible for us to access the data. It means that as a data processor, we only store encrypted data. We have no access to the keys. This is why we obviously cannot access the data. And end-to-end encryption thus raises security and minimizes risk, both for our customers, data controllers, but also for us as a data processor. And since, like any data processor, we, of course, subscribe cyber insurance, etc. Well, being able to show that we really implemented state-of-the-art security measures is a very important aspect. But end-to-end encryption is pretty complicated, and we were not expert at that time. This is why we chose carefully our end-to-end encryption provider. And what was important for us was the ease of implementation of such encryption process, and also, of course, the support of the team. And this is what we found in the expertise of Lybero. And of course, there are financial issues like any software providers. The cost of the implementation of encryption had to be affordable for us and don't put us out of the market. And this is probably what make us make that choice. It's that end-to-end encryption is affordable now. It is not expensive. So I mean, it might be difficult in the near future for any data controller to say that he did not implement encryption because it was too expensive, because this is not true. So this is also one of the reasons why we said, well, let's do it. Thank you. Arnaud, you
want
the floor.
Yes. So I thank you, Xavier, for that. And so we partnered with FairSmart, and we provided them our core technology of encryption for web application. And Lybero.net is a cryptographic web software editor, and we have two products. The first one is Crypt & Drive, which is an end-to-end encrypted drive and data rooms. And the second one is the core technology we use to have end-to-end encryption within Crypt & Drive, which is the SDK Libcrypt. So these are our core values. And well, we try to provide that. That said, in Encryption Europe, there are many cryptographic software editors, and we are all basically working on this kind of constraints for our customers. It is just that we have different use cases on different functions and kind of software. So to come back a little on encryption, so you have basically two types of encryption, the symmetric one and the asymmetric one. Symmetric encryption means that you have the same encryption key to crypt and decrypt your content. Asymmetric one means you have two keys, one to crypt, and it is, we say it is a public key of a user, and one to decrypt, the private key of the user. Most of the time, in fact, you are using mixed encryption, which is basically your content will be encrypted with a symmetric key, and you will use an asymmetric key to encrypt the symmetric key. The reason why is that first, it avoids data duplication. You encrypt your content once with one IES content key, and for each person that need to access this content, you encrypt only the key. That's the first thing. It allows to have a very fine-grained access management on your content. And the third thing is that there is a performance issue. Asymmetric encryption is around 100 times slower than symmetric encryption. So when you need to encrypt megabytes of content or kilobytes or gigabytes, well, you need to have something which is fairly speedy. So that's the reason why mixed encryption is so used. So if you look at the architecture for web application, you have something like that. You have the storage, you have an application server with whatever language you want, and most of the time you have a front end. And then you have your web browser that will be used to access the application. So if you look at the different threads, in fact, you have threads basically everywhere. It may be if your attacker has access to the storage, well, if it is not encrypted, it can access the data. If he can access to the app server, well, he can grab the data when they are going through, or it can do the same thing on the front end. Obviously, if you have an attacker that is on the channel, he can also grab the data, or obviously on the desktop. So if you look at this schematic, what you see is that you have interest to encrypt as soon as possible, because obviously you will lower the risk if you encrypt at this level or at the storage level, app server level, or even at the front-end level. But you will have at least one problem, which is if an attacker has access to the platform where the application is running, he can access the data. And it is also the case for the system administrator. So really, I think that's a key question you have to ask yourself when looking at such a system. Does the system administrator or does a system administrator has access to the content? If the answer is no, okay, it's good. If the answer is yes, then you have a problem, I think. So what we do with end-to-end encryption is basically to put the encryption directly at in the web browser, by the web browser, before the content is sent to any server. So it doesn't mean that you have no risk. It's very obvious that if an attacker has access to your desktop, well, he has access to your data. So, but what it does, he will only have access to your data and not the data of the other persons that are using the same application. And here you have to take care of the integrity of basically the JavaScript libraries that you are using on sending to your to the web browser. So that's where you have to be careful. So the libcrypt is here. It's just a JavaScript library, and all cryptographic operations are done basically at the end leaf, so in the web browser on your desktop. So encryption, okay, it's not so easy, but the real problem is in such a system is the key management. And you have to be very careful on that, because the person or the persons that have the keys or that have accesses to the key can, basically they have access to your data. So it is especially touchy at the key distribution or key creation level on what does happen when there is a key loss. If you are an organization, well, when somebody loses his key, you have to do something. The criteria you have to look at are, is this key management is local or centralized, local for each user or centralized? Is it a hardware or a software solution? Is it more something personal, or is it more at the organizational levels on the different functions that you can have? The technical solutions that you are seeing today is PKI, meaning that you are going to centralize at a central place that will guarantee that at least the public keys or each user's, the integrity of the public key of each user. And also the web of trust. Web of trust is the contrary. Each person is going to create the trust at his level, and you are going to use this chain of trust to know that the key of somebody is a good one. We try to have in Lybero.net a very intermediate approach to this problem. What we do basically is web of trust, but we use a digital escrow to put each content key on the escrow. And when you need to release the key, you have a nice quorum-based system, which is highly secure, and that allows to separate the authorization of access from the access, and which guarantees that a single person has never the right to access alone anything. So what we see today concerning the cloud is an architecture of this kind. So you have the storage, and what you will store is basically encrypted. Okay. So it may be in a cloud provider. At the same time, you need to have a key management server in one way or another. And the desktop will access these different elements, and the application is going to run basically on the desktop in your browser in our case. But at the same time, you need to have processing. So the processing is basically a program that will run on your data, but that needs to access the data. As long as you don't do homomorphic encryption, you need to decrypt the data to do the processing. So the key thing here is that to do the processing, data are decrypted, and then you must be very cautious where you put that. Basically, if you look at the nice white book on the Cloud Act of Exatrust, you will see that the only companies that are not subject to Cloud Act are the providers that are not established in the US and that have no link or whatever with the US. Meaning that in all other cases, an administration in the USA, for example, can ask to access the data to the provider. So this cloud provider, if you put that in the cloud, you can put it in your own IT infrastructure. this has to be very carefully managed. That, well, okay, you can do not whatever you want, because especially key management must also be very carefully managed, but on the key should be encrypted as soon as possible. But that, okay, you can use whatever cloud provider you want. So that's where my my tips on the subject. Thank you.
Thank you, Arnaud. So now that we had the initial presentation on how Xavier and Arnaud, Lybero, and FairSmart make the management of consent easy for the companies and secure, we are now going to listen to the perception or perspective from two people, from one professional who is Eric Bedell, CPO of Franklin Templeton, and from Christophe Buschmann, commissioner at the privacy regulator of Luxembourg. And so, of course, we are not asking Eric and Christophe to comment on the specific solution provided or delivered by Arnaud and Xavier, but more on the Uber question of, okay, why use encryption? In the words of Christophe, when we prepared this meeting, he said, actually, the real question is why not using encryption? So first of all, I would like to hand over to Eric Bedell. So Eric is, I think, a great example of an IT security professional who, over his career, broaden his scope and to become a DPO. I mean, frequently DPOs have a legal background, and then it's a kind of natural expansion to the role of DPO, which is still a very recent type of profession. And Eric is coming from the technical background, and he has been awarded the title of DPO of the Year of Luxembourg last year. And one of the questions we will ask him is how much this has changed his life. But for the time being, Eric, what we would like to hear from you, I think it's because there are a number of DPOs on this with us today, and privacy professionals. And so the question from your perspective is, okay, I mean, for you, how much encryption, I mean, matters, and how do you make the decision to support a solution which is encrypted or not? So what is the process, and what are the benefits that you see in selecting solutions which have a component which is encrypted? So you really, what we ask from you today is how it works in practical terms in your day-to-day work.
Yeah, thank you, Jean-Christophe. Good morning, everyone. So yeah, just quickly to your question, it has changed a lot my life, because now I'm talking with so many new people. My network has broadened a lot, and I'm talking at many conferences. So that's really what changed. I mean, my daily job has not really changed a lot with this title, but anyway, I'm really grateful to receive it. So thanks all. All right, so speaking quickly about the DPO role and expectations from a DPO. So what you have to do is really look at the risks. It's all based on risks. So what it means is you need to use impact analysis like DPIAs. You need to do some sort of privacy by design reviews. You need to have your recorder processing activities, and you need to look at all the risks that are arising from that. This is also, you need to apply that to the scope of data that you need to manage, that your company needs to manage in a way. So for example, you do have some very sensitive information, some non-sensitive information, but you need to link them compared to what you are doing with them. Like, give you a concrete example, if you do have a list of emails from people participating into your marketing campaign, that's not the same as dealing a list of email address of people participating into conferences around LGBT topics, you know, because the sensitivity is different about using the email addresses for. So this is one part of the scope. The other part of the scope is really where your data is. Like, is it internally in the company? Is it in scope in the cloud? Is it in scope of your processors? Is it something that you do with an additional controller, for example? So you need to mind the scope and look at all the data and look at all the risk arising from those data. In order to make sure that these risks are mitigated properly, you have different kind of tools that you could use. And this is really how the DPOs, well, most of the DPOs are doing it. Like they consider encryption as being one of the tools that can be supplied to mitigate the risk erasing from what I said before. So you do have, for example, the pseudonymization, you have the anonymization, but all of that are part of a complete set of tools that you can use. Again, depending on the risk, you may choose one or the other. I think encryption is really good because it is one, I would not say easy way, because I don't know if it's really easy for everyone, and even more for, exactly as you said before, DPOs coming from with a legal background. I mean, it's very technical, so it's very difficult to understand. But as a tool in itself, it's really good to think about it and say, okay, I do have a lot of risks to transfer data to a cloud platform. And the only way for me to use a very good tool, because again, cloud is quite good and it's accessible everywhere. It's really easy to use, but your data is in danger when it's on the cloud. So then you need to think about, hey, what can I do to do it better? And maybe encryption is maybe the best way to mitigate that kind of risk using a cloud platform. However, there are some discussions as well when you talk with the IT systems and the IT teams that, yeah, okay, but if I encrypt too much, it's going to be difficult to manage, or my data is going to be difficult to manage. Like it's going to be difficult to backup sometime. It's going to be difficult to restore as well. It could be difficult to share with all the people that needs to get a view on the data. So there are some downside to it. So again, I will just refer back to what I said at the beginning. You need to think about your risk, what is the residual risk, and how can you mitigate it using the right tool. And encryption may be one of those tools. So that means you cannot, or you don't want to use it everywhere, but at the same time, you want to use it where it needs to be used, and you really want to consider it.
And thank you, Eric. And I would like a follow-up question on this, which is the key message from Arno was that actually the real issue is maybe not encryption versus not encryption, but rather do well the management of the keys. And one thing we also see as a benefit of the encryption is, and rather maybe from the encryption key management, is the traceability of how people access or can access encrypted information. Is this something that plays a role in when you assess new solutions and you look at the integration of encryption into these solutions? I mean, how do you really, put a focus or value the possibility to trace access of people to the data?
Yeah, so maybe to your first question, I mean, it's really crucial when you, and again, when you are a DPO, usually you are not looking at all the technical aspects that are related to encryption. Like usually you do have a CISO or you have an IT team that knows about how to deal with it. But what is really important to say is the easiest it is to use, the better the tool will be used, you know? So if as a DPO, you are advising the company to use an encryption, it needs to be easy to do. And again, if it's on the cloud platform, if it's on a software as a service or service as a cloud platform and so on, you want to make sure that this one is maybe already foreseeing encryption capabilities. Like it's the privacy by design. So if you select a vendor or if you select a specific system, you want to make sure that this system is able to accommodate everything that is required by GDPR, including encryption or pseudonymization, replying to rights requests and so on and so on. So I think this is key to have a system that is working pretty well and easy to implement. To the second question, the traceability is very important. So who is having access to my data is really central kind of discussions, because of course that's another part of the mitigation I was talking before. If the risk says, hey, this data cannot leave Europe, you need to make sure that data is not leaving Europe. And if you are a global company, it's really difficult to understand who is having access to your data. Should there be someone, for example, maintaining the systems based in India, or the system admin is based in India? Does he have access to your database or just to the system that is holding the database, you know? And this is where encryption can be really useful for as well, because you are just sure by managing the keys properly that just the right people are having access, or at least everything that has been declared, or every people that has been declared as having access are really having access to it, and no more people are having access to it. So that's another way to use it, of course. Yeah.
Yeah, and that indeed, I mean, if people use, as we discussed in preparing this call, I mean, if people encrypt the data, but then you just have one sysadmin guy who has one key that's help you or helps the to have access to everything and encrypt everything, then it's not really super secure. And that's a segue to Christophe, so who is a commissioner, as I said, of the Luxembourg regulator. And again, a very interesting career with Christophe, because Christophe, you are coming from a technical background, and you have been working for a global consulting company for many years, and then you actually switched to the other side. I mean, you spent a good deal of your career to help your clients navigate, the fears about the regulator. And now you are now the commissioner. Then everybody now is terrified because you know everything from the inside. So, how would you see the growing interest for encryption, and do you see that's, we encrypt today differently from 10 years ago? That's one of the questions we have. And so when you see solutions integrating encryption, so how do you see it, especially in terms of compliance with GDPR?
Yeah, well, first of all, I don't think it's a question of two sides. So for all those who might be scared, I don't think there's a justified reason, because I don't see this as a conflict between two sides which needs to fight one each other. But to get back to your question in regards of encryption, I would say I take maybe a bit a broader view on the topic, because if I look at GDPR, which is my main topic, what is GDPR about? GDPR, it's about governance. It's about delivering on the promise on giving people back control over their data. While on this promise, obviously, you can only deliver if on the other side, you know that the one who is in charge of this data has himself the control over the data. So GDPR, it's about governance. It's about risk management and how to handle data. Now, this being said, if I look at encryption, I do see more advantages, and they have already been managed, than just protecting confidentiality. I see it also, and in a very important way, also as a means, as a preventive control on who has access to what, and how can we make sure that this control is working effectively. If you have a look at large organizations, they are working on a day-to-day basis with huge amounts of data, with hundreds of processes and hundreds of services that they deliver every day. Now, one key challenge when it comes to managing governance at such an organization, it's to control who is doing what with what, and to be sure that they told you everything. Now, obviously, if you have put encryption in place, not only as a measure to avoid a loss in confidentiality in case of a disaster, but also to be sure that only those who have a legitimate right to access data get the key to access this data, you have a huge advantage, because your control is preventive. So you don't have to chase people to find out what they are doing, but you can have this proactive role and make sure that that nothing happens which should not happen. This is one very important thing. Now, if you look at GDPR, I think Article 32 has been mentioned at the very beginning. Encryption and also some other techniques have indeed been explicitly mentioned in GDPR. And GDPR, it's accountability based, so we should reason from the other side. So everybody should be in a position to be comfortable to explain why he did not consider those explicitly mentioned security measures in Article 32. I think that's the more prudent approach. Now, you could say, well, I did not think of any reason why I should use it, but accountability is someone points you out specific techniques. At least think about why you could not do it. So that's one key point I would like to make. The other one is that GDPR I mean, it's a legal text, so it will not change every year, but it's dynamic in its application, meaning that Article 32 explicitly states also that the level of, or the number and the level of measures that you put in place needs to take into account the state of art and the cost of implementation. And those two elements, they do change quite a lot. And as those two elements change, I think your assessment on what is appropriate needs to be adapted as well. It has been mentioned that the pure cost of implementing encryption, it's not a valid excuse not to do it. I tend to agree. Now, there has been an evolution on this as well over time. I would say 10 years ago, cost of encryption was different than today. So please don't forget to take this dynamics into account when you do your assessment, because we as a regulator, obviously, we take them into account when we fix our level of expectation when we do investigations. So this being said, I think there's not so much negative things you could say about encryption. However, I mean, in particular, if you have to deal with many problems, and the technical ones are just some part of the problems you have to deal with on your daily basis, and I think Eric mentioned it, DPOs do have many other topics which are not technical of nature to deal with. Please keep in mind that encryption, it's one part of the solution, but it's not the ultimate solution which comes for free, and you say, well, today I encrypted everything in my organization, and for the next 5 years, nothing bad can happen. No, I think it's a good tool, as Eric mentioned, which can help you address some risks. It comes with other risks, which is very often the case in risk management, that one mitigating measure creates other risks. In this case, key management, it's obviously the next step that you need to deal with to make sure that, first of all, the solution is effective, and secondly, it doesn't create risks which you hadn't in the first place. I would add at the third element, please don't forget to make a surveillance of the security of the algorithms, the technologies that you use, because we know that by definition encryption it's working on a permanent strife on one against the other, and who can break what at what point in time. So don't miss the point in time where maybe you need to adapt. But this being said, I think it's definitely a technology which adds a lot of value. Now, and the last sentence, and I say this now in very general terms, and I mean, I was consultant before, you mentioned it. Please be aware of the fact that new technology is always marketed, and sometimes marketed maybe a bit excessively aggressively, in particular when it comes to buzzwords, and unfortunately it's very often the case for very technical topics that people would like to leverage on the fact that the one who could buy it doesn't understand what the technology is below. If someone just tells you, I sell you encryption, please sign here, I would apply professional judgment, because probably he did not do the due diligence to be able to claim that he effectively managed to encrypt the data.
Thank you, Christoph. That's a very good point. And actually, just for the people who don't know exactly how we work at Encryption Europe, so in order to become a member, well, you have to be an SME and provide service in this field, but there is a peer review. And we ask to have also participation of the technical leads of the companies. So I can tell you that it's difficult to assess even for ourselves. I mean, how much the solution is encrypted, but this peer review has a kind of a chilling effect on applications. And I've seen a few companies that were wanting to apply and say, okay, good. I mean, we are going. You just have to join, and you will be assessed by your peers. And I can tell you that sometimes I never heard of people again. So so it seems that the system works, and also keeps our audience to be acting as a community. One thing I would like to hear from Arno and then from Eric, which is also the point just before the one you mentioned on the buzzword, which is indeed, I mean, a reality, and people have, I mean, talking about encryption is not enough. It is the fact that on the positive side, we are in a dynamic situation, meaning the cost of implementing encryption gets down. Of course, you have to be careful of the way you manage keys, which is not really an issue in our case today with FairSmart, because this is just between FairSmart and Lybero. So that makes it very easy for the end users. But nevertheless, there is this issue of security of algorithms and risk associated with algorithm being compromised. Arno, how do you really deal with this ongoing threat, and how do you mitigate it?
Well, that's a hard question, but but there are a few elements. First of all, well, obviously you have different strategies concerning that. The base strategy is basically encryption algorithm were normalized. So you can, on the normalization process was not, it was a competition. So if you consider symmetric encryption, for example, so IES was, it is a Belgian algorithm, but it was adopted as a standard for I think US companies, and especially banks and insurance, after normalization by NIST. So and it's also the case for RSA, CDSA, or El Gamal was also normalized. So that's a first strategy. You can use that. The second one is you can rely on efficient on the high value research centers on researchers. So today researchers are starting to use what is called formal techniques to evaluate the value of algorithm, especially the transmission of information on these kind of things. So we benefited from that in our escrow system, because it is based on formal research that were made on digital voting, so by INRIA and CNRS. So that's the second strategy. And after that, there is, I would say, the standard monitoring of what is going on, peer review, also test, external pen testing, this kind of things that we do to ensure the quality of what we are doing.
Thank you, Arno. There is a question on the chat. I will let you read it. I've asked for some clarification. I would like to ask a question to Eric, while others may also ask question, which is this dynamic evolution of encryption. And so you have a long-standing, I mean, career in security. How did you see the importance of encryption growing for the work in IT security? I mean, do you see that it's indeed much easier today than 15 years ago? Do you see there is a kind of political momentum, so people really now are more interested? We had this, I mean, massive adoption of end-to-end encrypted instant messaging applications in the past 2 years. So how, from really kind of a security professional, how did you see the evolution and the perception on encryption and how it is today implemented, so compared to 20 years ago or 15 years ago?
Yeah. So maybe what I can say is that I've seen a huge shift into the solution offered by vendors and suppliers. So before, you had to manage the solution yourself. Like, say, you had to take the solution and just decide if you want to encrypt it or not. Like, you had, for example, an Oracle database where your product was running on, and you had to decide yourself if you wanted to encrypt this database or not, and what part of the database should be encrypted or not. This shifted a bit now to more packaged services, if I can say. For example, you are taking a new human resources management tool, which is Workday, that is on the cloud, software as a platform. And then this one is offering encryption. I mean, that's an additional price, of course, but it's just like by default encrypted. Of course, it is raising the questions of keys that we mentioned before, and I will not go back to that again and see who is having access to it and not. But I think you see more bundling up from the vendor side of the business. So I would say we see a greater adoption, even if I believe people are not really aware that they are using encrypted methodologies. I know, for example, that a lot of companies using WhatsApp, and WhatsApp is by default encrypted, but they don't know it, you know? So I think if you think about it, companies are adopting encryption, but in a transparent kind of manner at the end.
And that's makes me think about the question to Xavier, because Xavier, you are, and your company, you are the one really engaging with the CISOs and the DPOs. So you have to tell them, look, this is what I'm doing, this is how I'm helping to secure your data of your company, and this is why we use encryption. And you made a decision very early to implement encryption into your service. So did you, and you have been, I mean, providing you established a company 4 years ago, or even 5 years now. Did you see a change in the way people respond to the fact that you have implemented encryption into your service versus other companies who did not? I mean, do you see really this as a game changer now, or more today than 5 years ago? What has been your journey with encryption?
Well, clearly things are evolving, but there's as far as I've seen, there is really a market trend towards more security, more privacy, and more encryption at the end. Because again, encryption now is far more affordable than it used to be some years ago. So, of course, encryption is not the only security measure or the only security tool that has to be implemented, but it is one of them, and it is very efficient at the end. So, as a data processor, we run processing activities on behalf of our customers. But our customers need to demonstrate their compliance. They need to demonstrate that they take the appropriate security measures, etc. And we are here to help, basically. And we're here to make them feel confident with the processing activities that we run for them. And this is the reason why, in my humble opinion, the highest level of security is better than the medium or lowest one, as long as you remain competitive on a financial point of view. This is it. And we've seen it. If you can choose between two equivalent services, one is secured, one is not, but they are both at the same price, we will definitely opt for the secure one. Right.
Thank you, Xavier. So we are getting close to the end. I will have an announcement for the next session next month. But before I do this and conclude, I think the question from Wisdom would be a good fit for Eric, because it's, I mean, his suggestion is, okay, why don't we actually always choose for the most secure type of solution, which has, I mean, everything like included. So, and that's maybe a question you ask yourself every day. So what's your take on this, Eric?
So I would say first you need to think about the risk. And again, I'm referring to that again, because it depends what you want to secure. If you want to secure the list of coffee vendor or coffee machine vendors, you know, I don't really know if it needs to be encrypted at the time, because it's just a loss of time and money and effort at the end. So if you do your risk assessment properly, you should put everything that is required to mitigate the risk to the places where it's really meaningful to put the effort and money and value in. So you really want to protect what is really risky in your company and not protect the whole company. And also, I must say that the perimeter of the company has really drastically changed in the recent years. We have talked about cloud already. We have talked about outsourcings, controller processing agreement, controller processor agreements. This change a lot of things because the data that you want to secure is not just on your basis. It's not just in your data storage. You also need to rely on some other people. You need to transfer data to some other people. So the perimeter has really changed. So it's really important to think about it in a way. Hey, what is the most risky? Is it to have the data stored in a file cabinet or in a safe, printed in a safe? Or is it something that you want to transfer like to the other side of the globe through 5 or 6 different processors? Well, maybe this is where you need to select, exactly as Widom said, all the state-of-the-art security measures you can. So again, and GDPR is like that, but there are many other regulations and laws that are saying the same. It's based on a risk assessment. It's all risk-based. So as a DPO, you need to decide where to put the priorities. Of course, in the ideal world, we will be all protected for everything. But again, consider that, exactly as Christophe said before, when you put something to mitigate a risk, it comes with other risks very often. So that's not as easy as that.
Christophe, I would like to give you actually the last words. So because we are very lucky to have you and the regulator in this discussion. So like your conclusion on this. I mean, do you echo what Eric says, and then I will conclude.
Yeah, I mean, it's absolutely true. I mean, it's at the end of the day about risk management, and it's about managing risks in the right way. Maybe just one element that I would like to add is that we should, I think, be conscious. I would call it like this: that there's a huge difference between adding encryption on an existing process or infrastructure or organization, or thinking about encryption since the start when setting up new processes. I think today it is not acceptable that you don't think about encryption for everything new that you set up. That I honestly could not think about one single excuse why not to have a serious thought about this at that point in time. Now, when it comes obviously to making evolution of the existing landscape, the question is a bit more tricky. But I think the excuse not to encrypt is always present because to some extent it's easier to find reasons why not to do something than to do it. Now, I would like to stress out that if you stay for too long in such a position, you miss the moment where the benchmark overpassed the level that you need to encrypt, and you need to act in a hurry, and you will have higher costs than if you take the opportunity now that maybe for some elements where it would not be strictly considered obligatory, you take the time that you still have to move. And I think that would be my recommendation, if I could call it like this, at this point in time. For new things, please, it's an obligation to have thought about it. But for existing things, don't wait for too long. It will not necessarily be easy, but it would not be accepted in a couple of years and not to have a plan to move towards something equivalent.
Thank you. I mean, thank you, Christophe, for these very strong and clear words. And it's a perfect segue to the next session, which will be on 29th of April, same time. Also online, you can see the text on the Encryption Europe website. We will talk about legal interceptions of communications and the inextricable issue of backdoors in encryption. And I think some people actually argue that, well, maybe it's not such a great idea to implement encryption on existing and new services, and we will discuss this. So with Timothée Rebourg, who is the founder of SEALD, a member of our alliance, we'll have participants from Eurofin and from the head of Circle the set of security made in Loo. And its session will be moderated by Gregory from Encryption Europe, so my colleague. And so that's will be in a month from now. And so we'll discuss the other side. And that's going to be quite an interesting session as well. Thank you very much for this very, rich session. And thank you, well, Arnaud and Xavier to introduce us to what you're doing. And a big thank you to Eric and Christophe for having accepted to really give your perspective, your broader perspective as a CPO and the regulator. I think this helps us really giving the very transparent and honest picture on the need of encryption in our solutions. So thank you for this, and see you next month.